Good morning. My name is Connie Purcell, and it is my pleasure to serve as your worship associate today. Our theme for the month of July has been harmony, as you can see here. And this is our last Sunday on the topic, and I'm interested to see what Reverend Kent has to share. Harmony seems to me to be a very worthy goal, something to strive for, and yet I'm puzzled and sometimes even dismayed to note that down through history, we in the human species have not been terribly successful in sustaining harmony on any long-term basis. On some deep level, we seem to be bent on destruction and war, on bloodshed and acrimony, on infighting in families and tribes. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's part of the human condition, but I sure don't understand why it has to be that way. So, in spite of our failures, harmony is still a worthy goal. And I'll share with you a quote from the Dalai Lama. Quote, "I appreciate any organization or individual people who sincerely make an effort to promote harmony between humanity, and particularly harmony between the various religions. I consider it very sacred work and very important work." End quote. We come together in community, supporting and encouraging each other on our spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of acceptance, compassion, and open-mindedness. We heartily welcome everyone. So now, would you please turn to those around you and introduce yourself and say hello. Announcement for us?
Good morning. I just wanted to call your attention to the notice in the bulletin about the upcoming retreat at Camp de Benneville Pines. I'm wearing my Camp Champion shirt today because I want to tell anyone about it who wants to know more. It's on October 9th through 11th, so it's coming up. Early bird discount this month, and I should have registration forms for you after the service, but I'd love to answer any questions. It's a wonderful time in the mountains with the Laguna Beach and Orange Coast congregations, and I believe Caitlin will be there. I'm not sure about Kent, but it's a really wonderful weekend, and with programming and free time and a lake to go to. So hope to talk to you all later. Thanks.
Our various groups and events reflect our vision of being a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. And now Bart Bean will light our flaming chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lit the flame within us. And now please join me in saying our covenant, followed by our song of affirmation.
We gather here to worship as individual people, young and old, temporarily abled and disabled, male and female, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and straight people, all various colors and hues of the human race. Theist, atheist, agnostic, Christian, Buddhist, feminist, humanist. We gather here, each ministering to the other, meeting one another's strengths and encouraging wholeness. We give thanks for this extraordinary blessing, the gathering of separate, unique individuals as one whole, one body, one congregation. Here may our minds stretch, our hearts open, and our spirits deepen. Here may we acknowledge our brokenness and be ever stirred by love's infinite possibilities. Welcome to our time to worship together. Welcome to Tapestry. As we gather on Sunday mornings, we take time to share the joys and sorrows that shape our lives, not just the random theological ideas, but the real life events. Some of us do that silently by lighting a candle in recognition of those events, and some of us write messages to share aloud. I have one of those messages that came in from email. Probably many of you received it this week. It's the news that Catherine Ross, the wife of Tapestry's minister emeritus, the Reverend Robert Jordan Ross, died early Thursday morning. Catherine bravely battled Parkinson's disease for several years, and Robert's dedication as a caretaker was truly inspiring. A few years ago, they moved from Orange County to Sugarland, Texas, to be closer to family, and they're still listed in Tapestry's directory in the back section. I'm sure that Robert would be thrilled to receive a card or a phone call from any of you who knew them. We will hold this and the unspoken joys and sorrows in our hearts as we move forward through our days and weeks ahead. And for our young and young at heart, if you want to come join me up front, I have a story. Ooh. So, this story is about snow and how much snow weighs. And I was thinking about this story and I was realizing some of you may not have seen snow. Have we all seen snow somewhere? Yeah, okay, good. Southern California kids worry me sometimes in that way. Well, I actually picked up the wrong book, but I think I can tell you the story anyway. So there are two birds, a cardinal and a little chickadee. And the cardinals are a lot bigger than little chickadees. So the chickadee is sitting there in the snow, sitting on a branch, counting 1,352. And the cardinal flies up and he says, "Little chickadee, what on earth are you doing?" And the chickadee says, "Well, I'm counting these snowflakes because I think they're amazing and beautiful." And the cardinal says, "You silly bird. Don't you see all these flakes? They're all the same. It's just the same white mess. It's cold out here. Why are you so excited about the snow?" And the chickadee says, "Because each of these flakes I think is beautiful and different, and I want to see how much they weigh." And the cardinal says, "You silly bird. Don't you know a snowflake doesn't weigh anything? Have you guys caught a snowflake maybe on your tongue or it's landed on you? It hardly weighs a thing, right?" It weighs less than a gram, which is not very much. Weighs probably a lot less than a gram. So the chickadee sits there and continues to count the snowflakes and count the snowflakes. And finally, as dusk breaks, the limb from the tree gives out a big thunderous crackle and the limb breaks, because he sat there and counted all of those little snowflakes, each of which is very different and very beautiful, but all together they make a difference because they're whatever eighth of a gram weight comes together and can tear off the branch of a tree. So there ends our story about the chickadee and the cardinal and the weight of a snowflake. So you guys have a good class, and we will see you in a little bit. This morning's reading comes from Elizabeth Tarbox. She writes, "And so I say ours is a story of faith and hope and love. I say it's our need for one another that brings us together, that brings us laughing and limping into relationships and keeps us at it when we otherwise might despair at the fix we are in. I say it is the holy we need, the eternal beyond our comprehension, and one place we can find it is here, working and worshiping together. And I say there is a transcendent value worthy of our loyalty, upon which we may set our hearts. And it is divine manifestation. It is love. Well, let's join in a short time of silent meditation. Relax, take a few deep breaths, and enjoy the shared wisdom of silence. Namaste, Amen, and blessed be. This morning, I'm focusing on racial diversity at Tapestry. This sermon is really the fruit of two very separate conversations. The first conversation that brings up the topic is that we're talking about harmony all month in our worship services here. Harmony is not the same thing as unity or sameness. Harmony requires real difference. It arises in the midst of different things relating to one another in beautiful ways. I believe that harmony and diversity in general are some of the most beautiful and noble things in the world. They're the fruit of this sometimes painful and confusing creation that we call home. And for us in the United States, and here at Tapestry, racial diversity has a great deal to teach us about the challenges and the fruits of building harmony. This sermon on racial diversity also comes out of a discussion group that's been going on with Tapestry members. The first group started gathering to discuss the book, The New Jim Crow. It's a book about the systemic racism of the war on drugs and the American prison industry. It was a very eye-opening book, to say the least. And we were inspired by it, but perhaps even more than the book, we were inspired by our opportunity to discuss race and racism in a really honest and open conversation. Over the past several months, we've shared our curiosity, our personal experiences, some academic training. We've shared our vulnerability, our good intentions, and forgiveness with one another. It's been an opportunity for sincere growth for a lot of people. The group is open to anyone who wants to participate, and it meets again on Monday, August 3rd. In that group, the questions of diversity at Tapestry came up several times, and I'm sure it will continue to come up. So I thought it deserved some more attention from a wider platform. Now, while I'm talking about diversity here at Tapestry, the possibilities don't end at our front door. The same basic ideas I'm discussing also apply to other organizations, maybe the business that you're a part of, or maybe even your social circle. So there are 3 points that I'm going to talk about. First, know yourself. Take an honest account of who you are and who you want to be in relationship with. Second, think seriously about the questions of diversity, both the challenges and the benefits. And finally, think creatively about what it could look like, big or small. If you want change, you have to start somewhere, right? So who are we? Most of us, I hope, know that Orange County is not homogeneous. There's a huge stereotype of Orange County being white and wealthy, and it is dead wrong. As a whole, Orange County is composed of 56% people of color. It's true that a lot of that cultural diversity is in pockets of Latino and Asian communities in northern Orange County, But southern Orange County is not homogeneous either. Mission Viejo has roughly 31% people of color. Lake Forest has 43% people of color. Irvine has dramatically more, with around 50, and Laguna Woods dramatically less. All told, the area that our congregation draws from is very similar to the national average, roughly 38% people of color. South Orange County is not some whitewashed suburban oddity. It's a great reflection of the human diversity of the United States. It's not quite what our congregation looks like. By my quick and rough calculations of our membership, Tapestry is around 5 to 10% people of color. There are two very important stories in that number. One is that we are not an all-white community. We have a fairly rich combination of cultural diversity here and now. And every time we assume that Tapestry is white, and I do it myself, every time we do that, we erase the experience of those people of color who are already a part of our community. Like a lot of Unitarian Universalist congregations, Tapestry is a sanctuary for multicultural families, for LGBT families, and for adoptive and foster families. In some awesome ways, we do a good job of opening our arms to these diverse family constellations. And that's probably a good place to start. But the second story that 5 to 10% number tells is that we don't reflect the racial diversity of our own community. If we are a welcoming congregation, if we aim to make space for all of our neighbors, then it seems reasonable that our congregation would be at least as diverse as the community that we serve. Of course, numbers don't define us. We are more than demographics. The other big question that defines who we are is, why do we come into this community? Why do we want to be a part of it? One of the things that we are is a liberal religious voice. We believe that each and every person has the right, even the responsibility, to think deeply about what is true. Science, reason, tradition, inspiration, history, sacred texts are all welcome into that dialogue. The faith that we derive from those different sources informs our ethics, and our liberal faith is a critically important counterbalance to fundamentalisms of all sort. We also define ourselves here more and more as a commitment to children. Tapestry is a place for nurturing the hearts and minds of young people. I'm blown away by the simple logistics of raising a child. That has to be hard work, getting them fed and clothed and cleaned. But offering answers to curious minds about God, about life and death and right and wrong, that's nearly impossible for a family to do alone. Our religious education program offers space for those questions and a community to weave together answers in honest and hopeful ways. We also care for one another as a community. Yesterday at Dick Huddlestone's memorial service, we shared the responsive reading that ends with the statement, "All our lives we are in need of others, and others are in need of us." If you've been here for long, you have probably been on both sides of that coin. Tapestry is a nurturing community. Sometimes we're a voice for social justice. We aim to be a prophetic voice, calling our neighbors and ourselves into more just ways of living. And Woven throughout all of those activities of learning and caring and speaking out, Tapestry is a place for spiritual growth. It challenges our intellect and stretches our hearts to love more deeply and more readily. We come to Tapestry for all of these different reasons. Another reason that people come to Tapestry is to be with people who are like them. They come to Tapestry because it's comfortable. Typically, when we say this, it means that here in South Orange County, this congregation is a haven from more conservative religious and political ideologies. It's natural to seek comfort and to gravitate toward the familiar. And liberal religion, faith that incorporates all our ways of knowing, is at the core of our purpose. But some of the comfort that we seek is not at the core of our purpose at all. It's a culture. Tapestry is comfortable because we're familiar with the styles of music, with the low to moderate levels of expressiveness in worship. It's true. We're familiar with the food that is served, with the amount of personal space or touching that happens. We're familiar with the way that money is asked for and the financial expectations of participants. We're familiar with the length of the worship service, the casualness of dress, the fact that our children don't sit through the entire worship with us. Like I said, it's normal and natural to be drawn to what's familiar and comfortable. But please also hear that these things I've just described are expressions of culture, not an ideology or a mission. Tapestry operates with largely white, middle-class cultural norms. A lot of people come to Tapestry because it feels like home. Many of us come to be with like-minded people in a comfortable community, and that's okay. It's very human. But that desire for comfort is a challenge to our ability to embrace difference. For Tapestry to make room for diversity, our longing to work to create beloved community has to be a whole lot stronger than our desire to be comfortable with people who are like us. It's not clear if embracing cultural diversity is or is not a driving mission of this congregation. What I think has become clear to me is that it could be, and it would be a long, challenging, and transformative project. Very long, like decades. So that's the first question. That's who we are. I want to talk about the second question, about why does cultural diversity matter? The goal, to be clear, the goal is not to have a variety of skin tones in the seats or languages in our hymns. The goal isn't just about getting people in. The goal is building a community that is intentionally welcoming for all people. All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, that I grew up in, when it was still largely white, now uses the tagline, "Love beyond belief." They use it a lot. It's a great expression both of who we are and who we could be. Love beyond belief. We succeed in creating community where love transcends theological differences. That's kind of what UUs are known for. But love beyond belief invites us to imagine a community drawn together by love in a way that transcends not just theological differences, but cultural differences too. It invites us to be an unbelievably loving community. Making space for diversity means building a culture where each person is welcomed and honored for their unique gifts and challenges, welcomed as unique expressions of the divine, which sounds a whole lot like our first principle. From the moment I began thinking about this sermon, a quote was rattling around in my head, and it probably has been in some of your heads this morning as well. It says that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America. We've heard that, right? Like a lot of quotes, it gets used out of context in misleading ways. A lot of times the quote gets used to suggest that it's just how things are. That people prefer to worship with their own culture, and you're not going to change that. Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America, and it's true. Through a little bit of digging, it really didn't take much, I found the quote comes from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the entirety of that quote tells a very, very different story. It comes from an essay of his called On the Two Duties of the Church. Dr. King writes, "A further effort that the church can make in attempting to solve the race problem is to take the lead in social reform. It's not enough for the church to be active in the realm of ideas. It must move out into the arena of social action. First, the church must remove the yoke of segregation from its own body. Only by doing this can it be effective in its attack on outside evils. Unfortunately, most of the major denominations still practice segregation in local churches. It is appalling that the most segregated hour of Christian America is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning." I will never again allow that quote to be misused, or for Dr. King's words to be so dangerously misinterpreted. He was not saying, "Oh, well, folks like to worship with their own kind." No, he was pointing out that churches are called not just to preach about love and inclusion, but to practice it actively on Sunday morning. So finally, the third question: what would this sort of change look like at Tapestry? There are a few differences I can think of off the top of my head. The first is how we understand our ability to welcome newcomers, particularly those coming from different cultures. The measure of a community's openness and welcome is the feeling that visitors of diverse backgrounds experience when they encounter Tapestry. Welcome isn't so much about having the right political stance or having official statements. It's not about the big welcome sign over our door or the worship associate saying 10 times in the opening words that we're a welcoming community. Recently, some of you may have had this conversation as well, but I recently had a painful discussion with a family member of mine about the Confederate flag. Now, he couldn't let go of the idea that to him, the flag meant pride in Southern heritage and freedom of expressing that. He argued that it's not a symbol of bigotry or hatred. He said, and part of me believes him, that most people who wave the flag don't intend it to be an act of overt racism. What he didn't understand, and what I'm afraid he still fails to understand, is that symbols don't exist in a vacuum. The perceiver of that symbol interprets interprets it through his or her own lens. For the black community and for much of the white community in America and much of the world, the Confederate flag is a symbol that stands for hundreds of years of brutality against black bodies. The meaning of that symbol is defined not by the person who embraces it. The meaning of the symbol is defined by those who observe it, who experience it, those whose lives are limited by it. We're not waving Confederate flags at Tapestry. My point is, the measure of our welcome and solidarity with people of color is not dependent on how well we think we are doing. It's dependent on how we are perceived, how people of various cultures feel when they encounter our church culture. I honestly don't know what that experience is like. We're probably due for some good conversations to find out. Welcoming diverse communities also means stepping outside of our comfort zone a little bit. The fastest example that came to my mind was on Sunday mornings, we often sing "Go Now in Peace" in Spanish. It's a small but comfortable stretch. We do this to remind ourselves of our neighbors, but imagine how much more inviting it would be if we actually went to visit the apartment communities that surround Tapestry. Maybe knock on doors and have a conversation, or maybe just leave a flyer letting our neighbors know that they're welcome to worship here and participate on Sunday mornings. What does welcoming look like? What does embracing neighbors look like? It looks like going out of your way, just a little bit. I chose our opening hymn this morning, partially for the clapping tutorial, but also because it gives us a nice outline of what it might look like to more actively embrace Tapestry, to embrace diversity at Tapestry. The first verse of that hymn is, "Guide my feet while I run this race." Diverse community doesn't just happen. It's rare, and it takes a tremendous amount of work. It requires setting diversity as a goal, a core value of the organization, and remembering that value over and over with every decision that's made. I said earlier that for Tapestry to make room for diversity, our longing to work to create beloved community has to be much stronger than our desire to be comfortable with people who are like us. That means reconnecting over and over with the sacred calling of building beloved community. The second verse of that song is, "Hold my hand while I run this race." Hold my hand, because cross-cultural work is scary and risky. Talking about race and culture, privilege and oppression is hard for all of us. Going beyond the theoretical and talking about our own experiences takes tremendous risk and trust. But it's the only way that we learn and grow. It means personal vulnerability, and it means institutional vulnerability. In the same way that we wouldn't sacrifice our political or religious values for the sake of a healthy budget, commitment to inclusion would require that we consider diversity before we consider the price tag. We'd certainly do that for our faith. The third verse of the song says, "Stand by me while I run this race." Stand by me because I know that we will make mistakes. We will make awful mistakes that hurt one another. But if we make a commitment to stay in the conversation, to stay in community, then and only then can those mistakes be transformed into opportunities for growth. If you get up and walk away when things get uncomfortable or when you get hurt, then nothing will ever change, either here in Tapestry or in the world outside. Stand by me while I run this race. And finally, search my heart. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart and get to know me as a loving, caring, forgetful, imperfect person who wakes up every single morning and tries to do the best I can. Search my heart, and I will search yours if you let me. By now, some of you are probably hoping for something to do, something different to do, some action to take. So one, I've already mentioned, is this discussion group that already exists, that meets once a month that you can jump into. The other one, probably the best way to overcome our discomfort with difference, is to notice the difference and be curious about it in a loving way. It's a great conversation starter, actually. I noticed that you're a little more dressed up for worship. Is that something that you're used to from another religious community? I noticed there's a purple streak in your hair. What does that mean for you? I noticed that you speak with a little bit of an accent. Can you tell me where that comes from? I noticed that you sing hymns loudly and with vigor. Has music been a big part of your life? And over time, we begin to notice what makes each of us beautiful and unique. Now, I don't know if Tapestry will make racial diversity one of its core values and its mission. Today, I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what it might look like. Both the beauty of that calling and the tremendous challenge. It's something that we'll continue to talk about. It's not clear if embracing cultural diversity is or is not a driving mission of this congregation. What is clear is that it could be, and that it would be long, challenging, and transformative work. Amen.
Extinguish this flame, knowing the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again.
Would you take hands with someone near you for these closing words? May the love that is the doctrine of this church be also the strength and the spirit of this congregation and of our individual lives. Go in peace and let the light within you be a blessing to the world.